We are going to have an interesting session today with our distinguished guest, Mr. Hussain Abdul-Hussain. Shortly, I will introduce him. But before that, some short house maintaining. Our discussion will be about 30 to 35 minutes, followed by about 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your questions at the Q&A. So please, if you have questions, post them at the Q&A. As I said before, we are very honored to have with us today Mr. Hussain Abdul-Hussain, and the occasion is the publishing of Mr. Hussain's new book, The Arab Case for Israel. I hope that you could see that it's a little bit bright. This is Mr. Hussain's new book, The Arab Case for Israel. With your permission, I will shortly introduce Mr. Hussain. Raised in Beirut, Baghdad, and Baalbek, Hussain Abdul-Hussain is a research fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, FDD, and the author of the book, The Arab Case of Israel, that has been just recently published. Hussain's research focused on Arab affairs spanning Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Sudan. His career launched as a reporter and later managing editor at Beirut's The Daily Star. In Washington, he helped launch and manage the congressionally funded Arabic satellite network, Al-Hura, Iraq, before leading the Washington bureau of the Kuwaiti daily Al-Rai. He has also served as a visiting fellow at London's Chatham House. Hussain's articles in English have appeared in several outlets, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, and others. He also published frequently in Arabic media. He holds a degree in history and archaeology from the American University of Beirut and is fluent in Arabic, English, and Hebrew. Hussain, welcome to the briefing room. We are very honored to have you with us today, and thank you for joining us.
Hi, Avi. Thank you very much for having me on.
So, Hussain, before we start about a couple of your interesting themes that you bring in your book, I would like you a little bit shortly tell us about your fascinating private story.
Well, it is partially in the book, but I'll just give you a preview. My father is from Iraq and my mother is from Lebanon. And I spent the earlier years of my life, my childhood, until grade 2 or 3 in elementary school in Iraq, after which, this was the early 1980s, after which the family decided to move from Iraq to Lebanon because of the Iraq-Iran war. And of course, moving to Lebanon in the 1980s, this was the time when Israel invaded. This was the time when Hezbollah was being put together. My mother is from the town of Baalbek in the Bekaa Valley in East Lebanon. I spent at least 5 years living in that city growing up. This is when Hezbollah was put together. So I know this story intimately. I lived through it. I lived through many transformations that saw me come from a kid who was cheering for Saddam Hussein in the streets of Baghdad, because that's what school children were instructed to do, to someone who was holding Khomeini's pictures in the Baalbek. Then the family eventually moved to Beirut. I was among the lucky ones. I got access to, I went to American schools, American University of Beirut. I had access to the top-notch libraries and knowledge. And this was my journey. I evolved from where I was to where I am today. And as I evolved, Israel changed from being the most vilified evil character in my upbringing to being an asset that I think the Arabs and Muslims should benefit from in my adulthood. And this is my personal story, and I try to project this personal story into a policy, into the whole region, into a book. And I say, if you all do what I did, if you all experience what I experienced, then I think this is in the best interest of the Arab world and Arab countries, instead of trying to fight and fight and fight and go back to a time when Israel didn't exist, assuming that this would be a better arrangement.
Yes, Hussain, when I was reading this opening part of your book and about your own, life and the path you took, I felt like, in a way, very much connected, in the sense that the figures that you described, the themes, the period of time, you know, talking about Saddam Hussein in Iraq and talking about Lebanon and all these things, I felt like I kind of like in a time machine in a way, basically have an inside look of something that has been also part of my life professionally, of course, for many, many decades. And so we'll basically, you know, use the last sentence that you said as a segue to our discussion, as you basically now shared with us a major theme in your book. A major theme in your book is very clear and very simple. And basically what you are saying, and I quote you if I remember correctly, you said, the Arab world interest is to have peace with Israel. And you say something like, the peace with Israel should not be an outcome of the inability of the Arab world to destroy Israel, but it should be the outcome of the understanding and absorbing of the Arab world that this is first and foremost their interest in doing peace with Israel. Another interesting thing that you bring in your book is talking about how the region has been looking at Israel throughout different decades and period of times in the Middle East, particularly against the background of Arab nationalism, Islamization, and so on and so on. So these are two fascinating themes that you have elaborated in this book. Now, you, roughly speaking, quite in the beginning, expressed some sort of optimism, saying that you believe there are millions of people in the Arab world that are already, you know, are prepared for this shift in the mindset in having peace with Israel. But at the same time, reading the book, you are presenting some very significant, I would say, obstacles that are on the path. And I think it will be very interesting to try and to address some of these obstacles / narratives. And I would like to start with a narrative that has become very much embedded within Palestinian side, but also as part of the story of the region. And to that end, I would like to share a quote that you wrote. You are writing about a famous Palestinian poet. His name is Mahmoud Darwish. And you wrote about Mahmoud Darwish a couple of things, and this is the quote that I take from it. He says, Mahmoud Darwish, you said, never wrote a single word about the future. He never articulated what Palestinian future looked like. This is something that actually refers to one of the major narratives that you discuss in the book, and this is the story of what the Palestinians call the right of return. Why is it an obstacle?
Okay, so these are a lot of questions, Avi. I'll try to summarize my answer into this big question. Look, my basic premise in the book is that as someone who was a citizen of Iraq and Lebanon, and then who moved to the US and became a citizen of the US, there's a fundamental difference in the way that we look at the government and state and government affairs. In Iraq and Lebanon, you always think using your emotions. You think of government and governance using your emotions. So if you check out the Lebanese media or the Iraqi media, you will never find the words GDP, unemployment, economics, policy, long-term, 5 years, something. It's all about pride, dignity, reversing injustice, going back in time to when we used to live in glory. When you come to the US, it's the exact opposite. Over here, who cares where you come from? Who cares what your ancestors went through, whether they were colonized, whether they were colonizers, whether they were white, whether they were black, whether they were Hispanic? No one cares. What we care over here is that for us to live a good life and raise our families and children and hand over a better world to our offsprings and the coming generations, we have to do these policies. You know, no one cares about the injustice of your grandpa. We care about the future of your grandson. This is the main difference between being a Lebanese and an Iraqi and being an American or an Israeli, you know, judging by my experience of getting to know the Israeli mindset and culture and thinking. So what I'm trying to tell the Arabs here is that number one, you have to stop thinking of our emotions that, this is our land, that my grandpa had a mud hut that was taken, that my grandma had a bicycle that was stolen, all these kind of things. So what? Even if we assume that all of this happened, what's your plan to elevate to your standard of living, to secure a better future for your children and grandchildren? None. And this is why, by the way, Mahmoud Darwish that you mentioned, he is famous as a poet, and he was very close to Edward Said and to Yasser Arafat, and he helped draft this 1974 Arafat statement before the UN General Assembly, in which he said, "Take the olive branch, don't drop the olive branch from my hand. So take my hand in peace." Anyway, Mahmoud Darwish is also famous because there's a very famous Lebanese singer who was in the Communist Party. His name is Marcel Khalifi, for those who know the pop culture. And Marcel Khalifi is very well known among the Palestinian and the Syrians and everyone who supports, Palestine free from the river to the sea and whatnot. So all of the songs that Marcel produced using poetry from Mahmoud Darwish, all of them are "Ahannu ila khubzi ummi," which is, I cherish the bread that my mom used to bake. Now, in this time and age, whose mom is baking any bread anymore? I mean, let's be realistic. So the point here is that if you look up Mahmoud Darwish's poetry, if you look up Najil Ali's cartoons, if you look up the writings of everyone, it's all about something that's in all the Palestinian emblems that we have today, the Palestinian state that we have today. It's a kufiya, which is a traditional shawl that men put on their shoulders or on their head. It's the abaya, the women's abaya, the traditional dress. It's zatar and olive oil, which is just like breakfast for anyone who lives in the Levant. And then what? If you're thinking of Palestine as a state, show me where they say that Palestine will be about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Or it'll be a democratic country trying to attract foreign investments and trying to have lower taxes to attract. I mean, none of that. It's all bread and olive oil. Bread and olive oil are great. They are heritage. I raised 2 children in the United States, and this is what they eat every day for breakfast, and we're proud of it. But this doesn't make a country. This doesn't make a policy. So number one, what I say in the book is that number one, you have to understand how to separate between your emotions, your heritage, and be proud of it, and policy. And being honest, the Palestinians never had any policy for their state, or the Arabs who support the Palestinian state, or the global audience that supports. There's no policy behind this. Number two, I say, okay, now if you don't want to separate between emotions and policy, then let's talk about emotions. Let's talk about where do they come from. You have this narrative that you reconstructed in a way to make peace impossible. Look, I was trained in history and archaeology in college. Anyone who studies this discipline will tell you that one of the major problems that any historian faces is that people tend to think of the history from the perspective of today. This is called anachronism. You think of 1925 and you think, oh yeah, at the time the Palestinians and the Israelis were fighting. And you think, look, listen, at the time they didn't call themselves Palestinians. The Arabs called themselves Arabs of Palestine. They never called themselves Palestinians. When you said Palestinian at the time, odds are you meant Jews. The Palestine Airlines was a Jewish enterprise. The Palestine soccer team that played in the World Cup in 1930 and 34, every name was a Jewish person. There were no Arabs in it. So everything that was Palestine, if you look up posters of Jews in Europe, it's all about Palestine. Go build Palestine. So Palestine meant Jewish. The Arabs didn't endorse Palestine because the Arabs wanted to be part of the bigger Arab project. A big Arab nation that includes all of the Levant countries, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan, and Palestine, and Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. They thought of either one big Arab nation or one big Muslim nation. So they opposed the idea that these countries are nation states. And by the way, to be fair, not only Palestinians, the Sunnis of Lebanon as well opposed Lebanon. They said this was created by the French and the British. We don't want Lebanon as an independent state. We want the Lebanese to be part of a bigger Arab nation. The same thing applied to many in Syria, many in Jordan. So number one, the narrative Palestine was not a nation state. We were talking about one big Arab state. So this is where I come and try to deconstruct the history and say, listen, this nation that you imagine started in the year 3000 before Christ, and that Jesus was Palestinian and everything after this did not exist. And what the right of return that the Palestinians are trying to go back in time, not only in place. They're not only trying to go back to the mud hut of their grandpa somewhere in Israel. They're trying to go back in time to a time when Israel did not exist. Fine, if we go back in time, what is there? What do you have? And the people that I quote, one of the most brilliant thinkers in Syria and the Arab world, his name is Sadiq Jalal Azam. He was prosecuted in Lebanon for writing a book against critical of religion. Hazem Sarhi, one of the most brilliant minds, is a columnist, still alive in Lebanon. And Hazem and Sadiq Jalal Azam, they criticize how this whole Palestinian revolution was made into a countryside folk tale. They say you took modernization into history. This is not modernization. You're trying to go back. This is regression. This is not progression. So
you mentioned here Hazem Sarhi, and I want kind of like to take the opportunity because you mentioned him, and basically this is one of the people you mentioned in the book, and I read a lot of stuff of Hazem Sarhi and Sadiq Jalal Al-Azam about Hazem Sarhi. You mention him, you quote him, and he basically brings, in addition to that narrative that you now elaborated on, he brought some other obstacle or a narrative that basically bring it now not from the emotional place where you described so far, but basically bringing it from a very cynical political perspective. And I want to quote what you wrote, what you quote Hazem Sarhi, the Lebanese commentator. He says, Israel became one of the top deflection tools that Arab dictators to distract attention away from the brutality, corruption, and failing government. What are we looking here? What is that? This is nothing about emotions, actually, no?
No, it is about using emotions to deflect attention away from the failure in government. So all these regimes, the Ba'ath Party regime in Syria and Iraq, the Abdel Nasser pan-Arab regime in Egypt, all of them, they failed miserably in forming government with proper policies. So to deflect attention away, they said, oh, look, Palestine and the Jews and Israel. So this was one tool of deflection, number one. Number two, the Palestine issue was used by everyone, whether the regimes or their opponents, the Muslim Brotherhood, as a tool to construct these notorious intelligence spy agencies. And these spy agencies do not spy on foreign adversaries. They spy on their own domestic people. And they use these tools for their oppression. So Saddam Hussein, for example, one day caught a Jew or a bunch of Jews in Iraq, and he claimed that they worked for the Israeli Mossad. And I think that the names were three names and they claimed that they found next to on his nightstand, next to his bed, they found a list of people that were supposed to be his accomplices. Now, maybe the guy had a list of 2 or 3 people, but then Saddam added like 30 people, all of them Sunni and Shia Iraqis who were his adversaries. He added them to the list. And he went on and he killed everyone, the Jews and the Sunnis and the Shia. So the point here that Hazem makes, that everyone is aware of, is that this war for Palestine has been used for the longest time to justify violence against their own people, to justify maintaining non-state actors such as Hamas and Hezbollah. So Hezbollah all the time. Hezbollah doesn't have a reason why it should have arms, but it maintains its arms because it wants to liberate Palestine and support Gaza and defend Lebanon. And same thing applies to the militias in Iraq. Look at the Houthis. They have arms. They throw rockets and missiles on Israel. So the point that Hazem is making and that everyone is making is that you guys are using this this pretext to oppress your own people. And then in the Arab liberal sector, they started saying, listen, we're sick and tired of the slogan that says, no voice can be higher than the voice of the battle. That we're done with that. You can't really, whenever we want to ask for better policies, for a better education policy, for more freedom of expression, you come and press us and say, because Palestine. You can't use this with us anymore. So this is exactly the fault line. And this is how the Arabs decided, okay, they're lying to us. This is not about Palestinians. This is not about us. This is not about a better future. This is about them using Israel as a scapegoat, as a deflection, to just say, listen, we have to keep on fighting and killing you because, Israel exists.
So, at this point, you mentioned this whole thing about how Israel has basically, in the conflict, has become sort of a pawn in the service of dictators and government. You mentioned here, you quote this thing that says no voice should be higher than the voice of the battle, which I think goes back already to the slogan backed by the Nasser and the pan-Arabism and Ba'athism. Today, in our times, in the context of the story of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas, I think it was Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, who quite often says in Arabic, لا صوت يعلو صوت المقاومة. There is no voice that is higher than the voice of the resistance. So I bring here now to the discussion this story of resistance because it seems like a direct continuation of the slogans that has been used by regimes in the region to further fuel the flames of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict because it serves them. And I want to connect the story of the resistance, if you shortly explain to the audience the story of the resistance, because one of the things that you are talking about in your book, and I think I could detect in between the lines a lot of criticism of you on the Western discussion, is in the context of the misunderstanding in Western discussion vis-a-vis this whole thing that is called resistance that has become very, I would say, glorified in some circles in the Western intellectual and media circles. Could you elaborate on that in the light of the discussion that we have today?
Sure. So quickly, just to explain where the Arab split came from, in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Arabs started discussing because when they saw that Europe was pulling ahead of them in terms of modernization technology, they started discussing what would be the better way to catch up. So the Arabs and Muslims were split into two. One said that we have to abandon religion and modernize. The other said, no, we have to restore religion to what it was in the year 700, when Islam was lived its glory days, and this is how we restore our glory. So these are the two schools. Now, the first school prevailed. The first school imported its ideas mainly from European thinking. And European thinking is nationalism, maybe chauvinist nationalism, fascism, Nazism, you name it. So this was one component of thinking. This is what formed Nasser's ideology, pan-Arabism, the Ba'ath ideology, the Syrian Social Nationalist Party, SSNP, Hizb al-Qawmi Suri, al-Ijtima'i in Lebanon and Syria. All of these parties were structured after the idea that these are nations, that this is a zero-sum game, that nations prevail when they beat other nations. And this is the Ba'ath Party, this is everybody else, this is Nasser. Now, but this failed because they failed in the 1949 war, they failed in the 1967 war, 1973, they failed in governance. So in their place came the other guys, the ones who said, okay, now you failed, now we try our hand. And our hand is that we restore Islam, so everyone has to go back to the true religion. Every woman has to don on a hijab, every guy has to grow their beard, everyone has to be really religious, stop consuming alcohol. And this is and this is Islamic thinking. This is the Muslim Brotherhood, this is Hassan al-Banna, this is their thinking. So, but both parties, like I said, used violence. Now, Hassan Banna in 1949, the Egyptian government, at the time still the royal government, not Abdel Nasser, this is 3 years before Abdel Nasser took over. So 1949, the Egyptian royal government busted the Muslim Brotherhood arms depots across Egypt. Hassan Banna was taken to court, but he couldn't justify it. So he said, the reason we're stocking these arms is that because we want to liberate Palestine. So this is the exact same excuse that Hassan Nasrallah continued on using until today. We have weapons because Israel exists. So this schism, now I don't see schism anymore because the national chauvinists are now all Islamists. So now you see a convergence between Islamism and Marxist, whatever, fascist, whatever you want to call it, the other side, and they're merging together. Now, the most common thing between political Islam, what we call Islamism, political Islam thinks that the West is degenerate, that Western government is not worth it, that that Islam should prevail not only over Muslim countries but over Western countries as well. So Islam is a cross-national ideology. It's not like you're an Islamic Republic of Iran only. You are the Islamic Republic of the world. You keep on expanding. You take Iraq, you take Syria, you take Lebanon, you take Israel, you take everybody else. You take all the way to the United States. So Islam is a cross-national ideology. And then you have Marxism is also a cross-national ideology. And this is how you see the merger today, whether in New York or in Beirut, between all these intellectual elite types who consider themselves to be on the left, Marxist or socialist or some sort combination of communist, Trotskyist, anything of these, and the Islamists. And now Islamism, looks like the only justified and cool religion if you are in the United States. It's okay to brag that you're Muslim and you support political Islam. But it's terrible if you say that you're a Christian nationalist or support a Jewish state or whatnot. Even though Jewish state is not really religion, but that's how many understand it. So the point I'm trying to make is that eventually Islamism merged into this communism, socialism, and the only ones who are left among the liberal elite are the ones who support capitalism. And this is where you have the fault lines today. There are no more secular Arab nationalists. Secular Arab nationalism merged with political Islam. And even the founders, and I say this in the book, the founders of the two biggest Arab nationalist secular schools. Number one is Constantin Zre, who I met in person. He used to teach at the American University of Beirut at the Department of History. Constantin is the person who invented the term Nakba. And he, in his book, what he meant by Nakba was a military defeat of 7 Arab armies who tried to kill Israel when it was born. It didn't mean at the time anything of displacement or Palestinians forced to leave. It didn't mean that. So his thinking was a military defeat. So Constantin Zre is a Greek Orthodox person from Damascus. And Constantin Zre tried to secularize Islam because they thought, as Christians, we don't have a place in this big Arabic-speaking bloc. But if this becomes secular, then what counts is the Arabic language and Arab culture. So it's Arab nationalism. So even Constantin Zre eventually had to write chapters in which he said, well, the founder of the Arab nation was Prophet Muhammad. Even, he was a Christian guy, but he had to, and he was educated in Princeton and taught at the American University of Beirut, but he had to say, okay, the founder of the Arab nation was Prophet Muhammad. And he looked at him from a secular perspective. And then you had Michel Aflaq, who was also a Greek Orthodox from Syria, who created the Ba'ath Party of Iraq and Syria that ruled for 40 years. And Michel Aflaq had a similar conclusion, but Michel Aflaq went all the way and converted to Islam. And his disciple, the most famous of his disciple, you probably forgot about him now, people don't know him. His name is Tariq Aziz, and he was the foreign minister of Saddam Hussein. And he was a Christian who eventually converted to Islam because really the line between Arab nationalism and political Islam got so blurred that you can't tell the difference. So this is how these things evolve.
So I think it's a kind of like a fascinating moment, kind of like to conclude our conversation. And but it's amazing to see how you basically kind of like do this interesting connection between early proclaimers of Arab nationalism, who many of them, as you said, were Christians actually, and how today we are looking at this challenging, I would say, what is called green and red alliance. Again, I think that the audience by now have some taste of the treasures of this book, your book. And really, I've been reading the book. It was kind of like unfolding the story of the region from an inside perspective, and exploring different times, different figures, different ideologies, and I warmly recommend the audience to read this book. This is definitely an eye-opening book. As I promised, we are now shortly going to turn to the part of the Q&A. Before we'll do that, I would like to handle this part to my dear colleague, Mr. Josh Goldberg. Josh is the educational director of ITME, Inside the Middle East Institute. He will navigate the part of the Q&A. Thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Mr. Hussain, Avi. I'm the education director at Inside the Middle East, and I hope you guys got a taste. This is one pillar of the great work that we're doing here at ITME. One of the other pillars that we do is about education. Education, and we offer a fellowship specifically geared towards university-age students, graduate students, and young leaders. And this fellowship, Voices from the Middle East, about the Middle East, applications are open for our next cohort. This will be our third cohort coming up in October, from October 2026 through April 2027. This is a way to empower our young leaders, our kids at the university who are struggling with anti-Semitism, who are struggling with dealing with the narratives, as Mr. Hussain was talking about, around Israel, around the Arab world, around the Palestinians and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So if you are one of these folks, or if you know one of these folks who need to gain the knowledge, the skills, and the tools to become ambassadors of change, to deconstruct the narratives, and to become partners in changing the narratives around the Middle East, this fellowship is for you. Applications are open, and we invite you to get in touch with us and or to apply. There is a code here at the bottom right, as you can see. We would love applications. We welcome applications. To understand Israel, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the Palestinians, we must understand the Middle East. It is at this time that I would like to transition now over to questions. I'll read the questions, and then Mr. Hussain, Mr. Melamed, answer as you see fit, okay? Our first question, quote, is there any realistic hope that West Bank Arabs will abandon deeply ingrained traditional hatreds and become patriotic citizens of Israel?
Hussain, the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, the answer is they don't want to. I mean, it's not their intention. I explained this extensively in the book. These guys never called themselves Palestinian. In 1949, Jordan took the West Bank, but it was not recognized as part of Jordan internationally. And then Nasser in 1961, 1962, when he was bogged in the war of Yemen, and Jordan and Saudi Arabia were against him, as a payback, he instigated these West Bankers against Jordan. And he said, you know, you secede from Jordan, I'll support you, and you join my, what he called the United Arab Republic that had Syria, and Syria had withdrawn at the time. So over the past 77 or even more years, over the past century, these guys have been told that they're different, that do not accept, number one, do not accept partnership with the Jews in a binational state. So Palestine of 1920 was supposed to be a binational state, a state where both Jews and Arabs are equal. And then the Arabs refused this, including those in the West Bank. And in 1936, they launched what we would call today an intifada. At the time, they called it the Arab Revolt, not the Palestinian Revolt. The Arab Revolt of 1936. 1939, they went to the conference in London to end the violence. And then the Jews said, listen, we will live with you as equal citizens. And the Arabs said, no, Palestine will become an Arab and Muslim nation, and you Jews will live as a revered minority. By the way, this word, the revered minority, still exists in the Constitution of the Palestinian Authority that was published, I think, a month ago. So this is probably the fifth iteration of their constitution. So the idea is that this country must be Arab and Muslim, and its symbol must be a mosque. The Dome of the Rock is a mosque. And if they are Jews or Christians, they will be okay. No one will kill them, but they will not have equal rights. They cannot run for president. They cannot run for prime minister. They cannot lead the country. They cannot lead the military. This is the basic disagreement. So, number one, a binational state that everyone in America seems to believe is possible is impossible, at least from the Palestinian side. Number two, when you say the two states, one Jewish, one Arab, and the other must be Jewish, right? I mean, this is what you think when you think of two-state solution. The problem here is that Israel agreed to this in 1993, the Oslo Accords, and the long story of having two nations living side by side. Now, the main obstacle for why Oslo and this didn't happen, other than Hamas kept on, blowing up Israelis at pizza parlors and nightclubs all the time. The main obstacle that Arafat turned down Ehud Barak's offer for a Palestinian state was that Arafat insisted on what they call the right of return. This is the right of the return is that 750,000 Palestinians who left what became Israel in 1948, now their descendants, their children and grandchildren, are still being registered with UNRWA, and UNRWA has 5.9 million Palestinians on the books of UNRWA. And these people should have what they call the right of return to Israel. So, okay, so we create a state of Palestine in the West Bank, and it has no Jews in it, because clearly the settlements will have to be dismantled, moved to the other side of the Green Line into 1948. Fine. So this will be Arab only, Jordan Rhine, no Jews in it. But then the other side, which is Israel, will have to take in 6 million Arabs, Palestinians, to add to the 2 million Arab Israelis. That will be 8 million Arabs versus 8 million Jews. So the other side will be half Arab, half Jews versus a country that's only Arab. So there's no scenario that people in the West Bank think of wherein there's a Jewish sovereign state next to them, or they live under, or it's just not there. I wish they had any idea, any imagination of how to preserve Jewish nationhood, but they don't. And mind you, the word Zionism, which means Jewish nationhood and Jewish sovereignty, is used as a swear word in the West Bank and among many Arabs. So at this point, I don't think anyone wants that to happen in the West Bank. What you asked, the binational state for both nations.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hussain. Next comment is coming from our nation's capital, from Mr. Chiappa. Can you discuss how the Iranian war is likely to change the Israel-Arab geopolitical dynamic? For example, there are indications that the UAE will seek closer ties with Israel. Do you think this will happen? And if so, whether the change is likely to become more widespread?
Look, I think what you're seeing now, the war that we see in Iran now, is not splitting the region only, it's splitting the world. You are seeing the emergence of an alliance that includes the United States, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and India, and Somaliland, versus Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, France, and England, and Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. I mean, we are having a reshuffle. We're not sure what the final shape would be like, but the point here is that the fault line has stopped being Arab versus Jew. The fault line is now something else. The fault line is that you have Turkey that wants to inherit Iran in Syria and Lebanon and maybe try to, get itself into Gaza or something. This was not part of the original script that we had, that, Arabs versus Jews, 1930s, 1940s, 1967 war, Intifada. This is turning into something else. And this something else, by the way, which is really amazing to me because I watch it unfold here in the US, is that Palestine, which is depicted as, as a country, Palestine is not a nation state anymore. It's a symbol of the global South and the anti-colonial faction against all of the West. Palestine is versus the West. This was not supposed to be the case. Palestine was supposed to be a nation state, not a cross-national ideology. So what you see now that's unfolding, this is the world changing in ways that will change the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians in ways that we're still not certain how. So maybe it'll take some time before we can, tell in which direction we're going. But this is much bigger than Israel versus the Palestinians.
Thank you, Mr. Hussain. Our next question. Egypt and Jordan reached peace agreements, quote unquote, with Israel, yet remain hostile, both at the government and popular levels. So rather than progressing to greater acceptance of Israel, they seem stuck to the past. What went wrong?
Well, this is a great question. Look, I think for the Egyptians, something went wrong that when they went alone to peace, they had a lot of guilt that the Arabs did not, that they were outcast. They were thrown out of the Arab League after 1979. They only came back after 1990. The Egyptians were kind of vilified, became outcast. And I think this affected them and made them double down on saying, okay, we signed peace, but as a population, we're not going to normalize ties. We're not going for people-to-people peace. This is my explanation of Egypt. Also, if you add to the surge in Muslim Brotherhood sentiment and support among the population, the Muslim Brotherhood hates Jews, period. Not Israel, not just Jews, because they open the Quran, which has many verses, many of them against the Jews, and many of them in love with the Jews, and then they pick the negative ones and they say, listen, the Quran says that the Jews are enemies, so we can't make peace with them. On the Jordanian side, it's a bit different because a big chunk of the Jordanian population came from the West Bank, or among these 750,000 who left Israel in 1948, 1949. So the Jordanian population itself has a lot of sentiment that's against Israel to start with. Now, it's interesting because when you talk to Jordanians who call themselves the Eastern Jordanians, that is, the ones who are from the east of the Jordan River, East Bank. No one calls it this, but it is technically the East Bank. So if you talk to the native Jordanians, they are more friendly and amenable toward Israel and peace with Israel, and more supportive of peace with Israel. But if you talk to the rest of the population, then you will see, and this is why you have this, pull and push all the time. You see that you have protesters who take to the streets in Amman and go to the U.S. embassy or to the Israeli embassy to demonstrate. But then you see the Jordanian security just making sure that everyone is on a short leash. So they never give them any space to throw rocks or do any violence. So you have two things going on at the same time. I think that the Jordanian government is in a tough position, but I think they've managed to do, on average, on balance, they managed to do what's positive in my eyes. I mean, they can do much better. I think they can do much better. They're not doing it, but on balance, I think they're on the good side.
Thank you. We have time for a couple more questions, Mr. Hussain. So if we could keep our answers just timely. Okay, this one is coming from Henry. How are the concepts of Islamification and secular Arab nationalism playing out in Turkey?
Well, Turkey used what all other countries use. The economy tanked. When this happens, they blame everything on the Jews in Israel. And therefore, the Muslim sentiment surges. Notice that Erdogan, the autocrat of Turkey, the ruler of Turkey, whenever he faces trouble, he tries to play up religious sentiment. So he was facing trouble in the last round of election. He went to Hagia Sophia, which is the church that was turned into mosque, then was turned into a museum, and then he turned back into mosque. So he provoked all the Christians, and all the Muslims were cheering for him. But this is their style. Their style is that whenever they're in trouble, whenever they want to hide their corruption, they play up the Islamic sentiment and they make any attack against them look like as if it's an attack against Islam. And to do this, they need to be really nasty against Israel and Zionism. Was there another question, or other than Turkey, or was only Turkey?
That one was centered on Turkey. So we have time for this one last one, okay? This is an interesting one. This one comes from a US-based journalist, TV news specifically. Unfortunately, Western news does a terrible job at covering Middle Eastern politics, and I fear fuel the wrong narratives. Do you have any advice or recommendations on how we can try to change that, especially for those that may be the only one in their newsroom that see it this way?
Well, the only way is to challenge it with more authentic versions of their coverage. So I run across pieces in US media all the time, CNN or New York Times or you name it, and I call them out for it on social media. And I say, at least send someone who understands Arabic or Hebrew, or, I mean, you have people who are reporting secondhand or, using secondary sources. So the point here is that when we offer a more authentic, more convincing narrative, it becomes more plausible. I mean, people will maybe believe it more. But the thing is that many people who read the news media, they read it to support what they already think. So, and this is the issue of echo chambers that I don't think I have the answer to, how to get over echo chambers. People go and read what they want to read, and whatever disagrees with them, they just brush it aside.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen, first I want to thank Josh for leading this part. Josh, thank you so much. This is the opportunity once again to remind you Hussain Abdul-Hussain's book, The Arab Case for Israel. I strongly recommend you to buy the book and read the book. It's an interesting book. It gives a lot of insights and connects many dots in the complex story of the Middle East. I want to thank our guest, Hussain Abdul-Hussain, for your insights, your perspectives, your knowledge, your experience. They are all, of course, very valuable. And I want to thank you all for joining and sharing this event with us. We are very much looking forward to have you with us with the upcoming session of the briefing room.
Now, if you guys like what you've seen, and you have young leaders and university students that really need help with addressing the anti-Semitism, the anti-Israelism on campus, please send them to our website. Please have them join the briefing room. Our applications are open for our next fellowship. So please scan our QR code, come back to our website, and join us next for our next briefing room. Next episode, Sunday, May 17th, 12 o'clock Eastern Time. We hope to see you again. And in the meantime, shalom and salamat.
Goodbye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.